Thanks for being here.
So I've been working in the automated driving space for about 20 years now, well before it was really cool. But I always really liked it, and I got a chance when I started at GM Research to meet a gentleman who'd been working on it a lot longer than that. And he kind of convinced me that self-driving technology is really going to be a part of the future, even if it didn't look so in the 2000s. So as was mentioned, I did participate in the 2005 DARPA Grand Challenge, as well as the 2007 DARPA Urban Challenge. On the Grand Challenge, I was on the Carnegie Mellon team. You can see our two vehicles up here. A lot of people look to this event as kind of like the event that really started a lot of this, and they look to Silicon Valley as kind of the group that really got automation going. But I want to talk a little bit about the history well before that kind of set the ground rules. So we'll start with a few quotes. Future ain't what it used to be. And actually, a lot of this talks about the fact that there is, they say that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And I think we can learn a lot about where the future is going to go by looking at the fact how some of the patterns we do see in history. And so the DARPA Challenge was a race that kind of got a lot of people familiar with automated driving technology. It kind of showed that even though these vehicles weren't all that reliable, there was a lot of promise there. And there was a race held 110 years before the DARPA Grand Challenge. That was trying to show the reliability of the automobile. It was a 50-mile race around Chicago. It took 10 hours. And of the, I think 20 or so cars that started, 2 finished. And Derriere was the one that came in first, followed by Benz. And one of the big things as to why it took 10 hours was they had to stop and fix the car every few hundred feet. Because that was the reliability of cars in the early days. Henry Ford built a race car called the Sweepstakes, and his big claim to fame was a car that didn't need to get fixed during the middle of the race, and so he was able to beat Whitney, which was the one that had the quote about cars don't have the brains that our horses have. He was able to beat Whitney, even though Whitney was a much more powerful car because of reliability, and Ford was able to use his winnings to raise the venture capital funds to start the Ford Motor Car Company, where a few years later, he would bring out the Model T and make the automobile an appliance. If you sell a customer a Model T, and the next year's Model T is exactly the same, the one after that is exactly the same, there's not a whole lot of reason for someone to buy a second or a third one, because the first one was just fine. What we did see, though, starting with General Motors and here at Chrysler, was that by the 1920s, building a car that drove just wasn't enough. Styling and technology was really driving the auto industry, and what you saw was every year there would be a new design, kind of like we have with iPhones and cell phones. You don't get rid of your old iPhone because it doesn't work anymore. You get rid of the old iPhone because there's new features on the new ones, the design is better. Also, like we saw in the cell phone industry, it used to be that you had to buy a car outright, but then they came up with payment plans and trade-ins and all these things that help make new cars affordable, to the point where even though Henry Ford's Model T was 1/3 the cost of Chevy started out selling, and eventually Chrysler started out selling Ford. So every year they're trying to develop new technology, and by 1930, the first automation comes to aircraft, the Spirit autopilot. And automakers having gotten a lot of their technology from the air industry. At Chrysler, we got, for example, hydraulic brakes from Lockheed, as in the Lockheed Martin company. So the automakers are trying to figure out how do we incorporate this technology into our cars.
When the car leaves the factory, only one thing is needed for safety, and that's a careful driver. If the manufacturer could equip every car with an automatic driving mechanism, the car would always do just what it should do when it got out on the road.
So this video goes on to explain, if you had an automated car, how would it drive more safely than a human? And at the end of the video it says, well, we don't have automated cars yet, so the only thing that creates safety in your car is you, the safe driver. And so it was a commercial piece trying to promote the safety of human driving, but by looking at a possible future of automated driving. Automotive technology was new. People tend to be afraid of things they don't understand. Automobiles are very complex. And so what you saw was a lot of automakers going out and trying to explain technology to the layperson. Probably the most famous examples of which was the GM Motorama display, which are basically like a mobile Genius bar, where GM would go city to city with big displays that showed how engine works, and had books that would explain the technology, because you're trying to explain a lot of different technology to a person who is used to, horses, or maybe not even owning a form of transportation, and now they have to know how the engine works, the transmission works, the suspension works. So educating the customers is a really big deal, and this is an excerpt from one of those early booklets. So the technology, they've gotten into this annual model change cycle, and they're always trying to push the limits as to what they can do. And so for the 1939 World's Fair, GM decides they want to do something really spectacular. So they hire a designer and futurist by the name of Norman Belgettis to share his vision of what the future was going to be like.
And the 1960s express motorway. Along the ledge of this beautiful precipice, traffic moves at unreduced rates of speed. Safe distance between cars is maintained by automatic radio control. Curved sides assist the driver in keeping his car within the proper lane under all circumstances. The keynote of this motorway: safety. Safety with increased speed.
And so he envisioned a highway system that spanned coast to coast, where you could travel at 75 or even 100 miles an hour, when we had, an era where we, almost everyone had dirt roads. And so this is a really, unbelievable idea, and it was kind of believed that humans wouldn't necessarily be the safest to travel at those speeds under manual control. And while the announcer talks about automatic radio control, it may or may not mean radar, because the term radar hadn't been invented yet. Radars had been invented, but no one had a word for them yet. So Norman Belgettis had this vision for automation, where the vehicles were separated from pedestrian traffic, and where you had these giant intersections that were capable of allowing vehicles to flow from one highway to another, maintaining 100 mile per hour speed. So he had worked out all of the math and kinematics. Basic concept was that the vehicles would follow a buried wire in the ground, similar to how early auto landing systems had been developed, where the airplane follows the radio beacon to land. He also envisioned where the cars would communicate with each other wirelessly, and they would not need a traffic light anymore, and they could weave through an intersection just by varying their timing ever so slightly, so that nobody had to stop. And so this is from 1940 that he's working through all this. And there's a lot of great quotes. I've taken them out for brevity, but about car-to-car communication, driver assistance technologies, and how there are people already working on this by 1940. This exhibit that Belgettis put together for the World's Fair had such a big impact on the American populace that in 1941, Franklin Roosevelt invited Belgettis up to the White House to have a workshop on automated highways. When we think about that, something you might hear in the news today, but this was 1941 with FDR. They were already talking about how do we build a highway system, how do we automate it. Well, we had a low war, and that derailed a lot of technology development. And but what we did have is a lot of technology that came out of the war that people were looking for new ways to use. We started to see, since radar became very popular during the war, we started to see articles in the New York Times about 1946 cars may have radar, speed control, and all sorts of rumors of technology coming out. GM starts a series of programs to kind of push out automated driving called the Firebirds. They also were cars that were all jet powered. This one happened to have a titanium body, one of the first car with disc brakes and a lot of other technologies. This is before the SR-71 had a titanium body. And the gentleman in the driver's seat, that's Bill Spreitzer. He was the guy who mentored me when I first started at GM Research. And so he'd been working on these vehicles all the way back then and kind of got me really excited about what the future held.
Move to electronic control strip in center lane.
So cars would have control towers like airplanes. And the wire would tell the cars how fast to go and when to slow down.
Well done, Firebird 2. You're now under automatic control. Hands-off steering.
The central control system would control all the obstacle detection, all of the speed limit commands, all the intersection maneuvers from a giant centralized computer, the same way we were controlling our nuclear missile interception program, the SAGE program, and everything would be centralized, including routing and navigation. There were even papers on routing algorithms. How would you develop an automatic route from Chicago to Detroit? What roads would you take? Those algorithms had been developed by 1959. And I've got some papers on them, work being done by the actual state departments of transportation. Well, if you're going to do an automated vehicle, you need to have a form of way to control it. And so GM invented unit control, which was the first drive-by-wire. Keep in mind, fly-by-wire hadn't been invented yet. Here was unit control embodied in the Firebird 3 concept vehicle. Electronics had just started to make the scene, but electronics, transistors didn't have some of the power capabilities and bandwidth capabilities of vacuum tubes, so their computing system was a hybrid of solid-state electronics and vacuum tubes. As you can see, the computer in the fender. And then you had these little magnetic pickup devices that could read the wire buried under the road to tell the vehicle where to go and how fast to go.
Unit control is a new concept in STEM, designed to simplify your driving task. This system uses specially developed electronic computers to control hydraulic power servos, which actuate the brakes, throttle, and steering. Push forward to accelerate, steer left or right, pull back for braking. Rotation of the control knob selects forward, reverse, or park. There is no mechanical connection between the control knob and the front wheels, but car motion feedback is supplied to the driver by the mass of the knob. To this, we have also added auto drive, an automatic guidance. Want to sit back and relax? Well then, set in the speed you want to drive, and switch over to automatic guidance.
And so this was a functioning prototype.
And Firebird 3 is on its own, receiving its commands from a wire in the road.
So along the way, you started to see some of the first research into sensors, and this is the Cadillac Cyclone, which had a dual radar system. You can see the radomes on the front of the car. Chrysler was working on their own radar cruise control. Radar cruise control hadn't been invented yet, but everyone was already thinking about having radar control the car's speed. And this was the gauge cluster for the Cyclone. If you look at the very top line, it says proximity. And right below it says stopping distance. And when the two needles touch, that means you were going too fast for your stopping distance. And so it used the radar in a very crude mechanical way of determining when you were exceeding the stopping distance of the car. So very early for collision warning. Chrysler had been working on their adaptive cruise control, which they were calling at the time autopilot. And they actually brought out a regular cruise control under the name autopilot, only to find out that was a horrible name for a regular cruise control because everyone thought it drove the car for you when the version they brought out only did speed maintenance, and so they dropped the autopilot name after 1 year. But maybe a lesson some of our colleagues in Silicon Valley can learn about, setting expectations with naming. So you start to see in the press a lot of articles about self-driving cars, and it's actually hard to find articles this far back without going into the microfilm archives, but this one I was able to find at the Berkeley Transportation Library, Popular Science. And then the New York Times puts all of their articles online, all the way back, and over 10 years I found 60 different headlines about automated driving in the New York Times alone. Just one publication had 60 articles about automated driving. And then a lot of the same conversations we have now. Are we going to have driver assistance first, or we're going to go straight to full automated driving? Is it irresponsible to allow humans to drive anymore? How is the investment going to be made in this technology? And there was even a race by 3 states, Michigan, Ohio, and Maine, to build the first 100 miles of automated highway, each one pledging that they would put in the $3 million needed to develop the 100-mile highway, a cost of $30,000 per mile. Now, ultimately, those test tracks didn't get built, and ultimately, when GM went to Congress to ask for the Eisenhower highway system to have this automation capability installed as part of the building of the highway system, Congress said there isn't a lot of interest from our voters in this technology. And what you were seeing kind of going on in the background was we started to see that car culture was kind of really taking on a life of its own. In this case, hot rod culture in Southern California, the Beach Boys writing entire albums on cars and the fun of driving, and it really didn't work well with this vision of you give up all control and you're no longer allowed to drive again. Because at the time, the technology only allowed for a all or nothing solution. Also during this time period, we started to see fear of automation is taking away jobs. And throughout the 60s, we had something called automation anxiety. With the same type of articles that we see today about automation is going to take away jobs and, what's the future of the economy going to be. It got so bad that President Johnson actually put together a commission, a blue ribbon panel on automation, the economy, and the future, to try to figure out what the economic impacts of automation was going to be. And this was something that was starting to scare a lot of people. And you started to see some of the resources that had been dedicated to automated driving now moving to the space program. Chrysler developed the Atlas and Jupiter rockets, which were Atlas was the first to put a man into space. GM was selected as the contractor of a number of subsystems on Apollo. This is the Lunar rover. Anyone recognize the joystick? It's the same joystick that was used in Unicontrol. It was literally a transplant. The handle was different, but the underlying electronics were a transplant from the automated car program to the space program. Also, GM did the fly-by-wire for the Apollo, which was the first fly-by-wire ever. It was actually a technology taken from cars and brought into the space program. We think about all the technology we get from the space program, but these are some examples of technology that came from the automated car program and was moved into space. GM also did the digital fly-by-wire on the space shuttle, which was the first digital fly-by-wire application. So during this time period, I mentioned the hot rod movement. The hot rod movement rolled into the muscle car era where anything that got in the way of more horsepower was taken off of cars. We started to see a technology regression where fuel injection went away, automatic high beams went away, all these technologies that we had started to get pulled off in the sake of more horsepower. But the researchers will progress and the technology will evolve, and you start to see a vision for automation that can work with manual driving.
Operating the system is just slightly different from today's cruise control.
This is
Once the
I believe
cruising speed is
mid-90s.
set, you select a comfortable distance for the system to maintain between vehicles. As you approach a slower moving vehicle, your car automatically adjusts its speed
Actually, this
to
may have been
maintain the
the,
preset distance.
early
Allow you to
90s,
pass if you
early 80s.
wish and resume your previous speed.
So that was one of the General Motors prototype adaptive cruise control systems. There was an automated program going on at Carnegie Mellon, 98% hands-free. And this was with the level of technology we had in 1995, the level of computing, the level of algorithms. And it was just that 2% that remained that was the big challenge. And it's still a big challenge. And so we saw a lot of programs in the 90s, like the automated highway system, and we started to see some of the first adaptive cruise control systems hit the market. We also saw lane keeping in Japan, and in the early 2000s, DARPA, really wanting to push automation for military programs, decided to fund this DARPA challenge as a way to get defense contractors to compete against each other. Well, it turns out it wasn't really the defense contractors that really went after the technology. It ended up being universities and car makers that really were putting a lot of effort into the DARPA challenge. From that, you had things like Waymo, which the guy who ran it for many years was Chris Urmson, a guy on my thesis committee. And this is the Chrysler Waymo van. But I kind of look and say, well, with all this stuff about millennials not liking cars, do we run the risk of maybe making some of the same mistakes by assuming the technology is just going to be adopted because people don't like to drive? And so, with just a little bit of time consideration, I'll go through this pretty quickly. Atlantic Monthly was one of the first to say millennials were giving up their cars, only to come back a few years and say we were wrong. MTV did a study. You may have seen the studies that said millennials would rather have their cell phone than their car. Well, an MTV study, which was a lot bigger than the Zipcar study, found that 70% of millennials enjoy driving versus 58% of boomers and 66% of Gen Xers. 60% of millennials said they feel like losers among their peers without their cars. 76% of young people say it's important that their car gives them control. 73% of millennials say it's important that their car helps them become who they want it to be, versus 50% of boomers, or only 24% of Gen Xers. So the Gen Xers are the ones who are not looking to their car to help them communicate their identity. We also saw music while Beach Boy sales are down. Rap music sales are certainly up, and I like this one because it sings about radars. So people who mentioned that music doesn't sing about cars anymore probably haven't paid much attention to where rap music has been going. And I found this really interesting chart on the web that shows the references of car brands by rap song over the years. And yes, we did have the dip during the recession when fewer rappers were singing about cars, but we've more than recovered. We're now kind of at a peak mention of cars and rap music. Also, a lot of things have been made about that fewer 16-year-olds have driver's license than in previous generations. Also, previous generations didn't have to graduate a driver's license, where you couldn't get a full driver's license at 16. And so this kind of gives you an idea of the time frame at which we went from no states with graduated driver's licenses to almost all the states having graduated driver's licenses. It was a lot harder to get a driver's license, and in many states you couldn't get one until you were a full driver's license until you were 18. So I like that quote because it shows the early relationship between Michael Knight, David Hasselhoff's character, and KITT, the automated driving cars. I think most of the people in this audience probably know what I'm talking about. Is there anyone who don't know Knight Rider? So Knight Rider was a 1980 show about an autonomous car and his sidekick, Michael Knight. But what you had there was a relationship that developed between Michael, who was the driver and the detective, and KITT, who was the automated vehicle. And it wasn't that Michael could never drive, he actually drove quite a bit. He didn't have to drive, it was the freedom to choose when to drive that really made KITT kind of an exciting concept. And I just know kind of consciousness of time, I'll kind of maybe skip through some of these, but I'll skip through the levels. We'll talk about the levels later. The importance of trust. I'll do this roller real quick. education, like the Apple Genius Bar, is a really important thing that we don't have a whole lot of. And I think the fear that you see, like in Michael Nutt's reaction, was not understanding the system, not understanding how it worked, not understanding what it was capable of. And it was General Motors with their Motorama, and it was Apple with the Genius Bars that helped take this technology that was kind of complex and scary and helped make it acceptable to the mass market by taking the time to explain how it worked. And I think once people understand how things work, they tend to be a lot more accepting. Another clip, let's get some of these. So I'll just combine on some concept that automation doesn't have to be just one thing. It's a lot of different experiences. And this is a project I worked on, Terramax. It's an autonomous off-road vehicle. It has a certain set of capabilities. But in this case, the Department of Defense was very interested in.
It just goes.
It's a pretty cool vehicle. Or Stanford had developed a new parking app. Showing that automation doesn't have to be boring, it can actually be pretty exciting. And then this was a BMW feature that developed called the Track Trainer. And the idea here was that if you want to learn how to drive a race car, it helps to experience from the driver's seat what the optimal line is, when to accelerate, when to decelerate. And this is a car that allows you to experience that from the driver's seat and to take over and to transition to manual and automated driving control. We really learn how to take a race car, how to run a race car.
Please brake, brake, brake! Brake, brake! It is! I can't believe this! Now into the tyres, 100 kilometers an hour, that's 62 as we brake to turn into Chicago. As we steam towards the hammerhead now, 100 miles an hour. And it's going to go hard on the brakes. It has. There it is. I'm not doing that. My foot is still nowhere near the pedals. It's turning in. Can you imagine if the British had built this? Ah, well, we didn't get it quite right. That's what happened there. We just missed that little bit here. Is it going to lift for the follow-through? We're now up to 130 kph, 140. Apparently you can even put this on an M3 if you really want to frighten yourself to death. Coming up to the tyres. Here we go. 120. 130. This is 95 miles an hour through the tyres. Bang on. Please don't get it wrong. Please don't get it wrong. Please don't get it wrong. And it's just changed up to fourth. Brake, 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 brake. Second to last corner. Come on. Good. Oh, stick. You are sacked. You are so sacked. It's unbelievable.
So I think he's having fun with automation, but I'll end on this note. This is that video we saw earlier, the musical part. But that's kind of my talk. I wanted to get people familiar with a little bit about the history, learn, that there are reasons why, reasons other than technology as to why this technology hasn't been adopted. And I think we've got to really take some time to understand the customer and how to make the customer excited about the technology if we want to get social acceptance. So I'll leave it there and let you listen to the music roll out. So, any questions? Or? Most of the time.
Good evening, modern travelers. Won't you be our guest? We have pushed button 11 at its very best. There's automatic.
So everyone wants to watch the rest of that. No, it is pretty